and social media company Reddit, as well as Keith Gill, a trader involved in the Wall Street Bets subreddit. We heard directly from those involved in the short squeeze and volatility, and we got the facts. In our second hearing, we received testimony from a number of capital markets experts and investor advocates to hear their views and began to assess possible legislative and regulatory steps that may be necessary. We've examined conflicts of interest in the market. We have scrutinized payment for order flow, potential systemic risk to our financial system, the gamification of trading, the clearance and settlement process for trades, and the evolution of trading with the rising use of social media and new technologies. Today, we will focus on the regulatory response to the market volatility. Specifically, we will hear testimony from the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and the Deposit Trust and Clearing Corporation about their responses to events we are examining. It is critical for our cops on the block at the SEC to protect investors and ensure that our markets are transparent and fair. Unfortunately, the previous administration's appointees to financial regulatory agencies were often more interested in helping out Wall Street than protecting Main Street. I'm very pleased that, thanks to President Biden's strong leadership, we now have Gary Gensler at the helm of the SEC. Chair Gensler, I look forward to hearing your testimony and discussing your views on the short squeeze and surrounding events, as well as practices like payment for order flow. I'm also interested in hearing from Mr. Cook and Mr. Bobson, the CEO's private sector corporations, FINRA, which oversees broker dealers, and FTCC, which provides clearing and settlement services to our securities markets, respectively. Under my leadership, this committee is focused on ensuring accountability for Wall Street. I decided to convene this series of 3 hearings on this topic to ensure that Congress is well informed on developments in and functioning of our capital markets, and to put Wall Street on notice that we are watching closely. I yield back the balance of my time, and I now recognize the ranking member of the committee, the chairman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And at what I believe is our last hearing on GameStop, I'd like to talk about what we've learned. We've learned that everyday Americans have a newfound interest in the markets, and that's positive. We've learned that financial technology is here to stay, and it's providing more opportunities for retail investors to participate in our markets. That's positive. We've learned that Reddit is powerful. We've learned that Roaring Kitty is indeed not a cat. And we know just as much as we did at the first hearing. And I continue to hear the same policy solutions from my Democrat colleagues. The repackaged, old, outdated policy failures wrapped in whatever's in the news this week to sell the American people on the idea that this time is different. Well, it's not. Like so many other bad progressive ideas sold under the guise of investor protection, which I think is important, Democrat proposals will ultimately reduce access to investment opportunities and charge DC bureaucrats and give them control of investing decisions of everyday Americans. If this committee is interested in responding to late January's events, we need to expand the accredited investor regime, not restrict it. It's ridiculous that our securities laws force most everyday Americans to the sidelines of early growth opportunities, investment opportunities. We need to find innovative solutions that allow more people to invest in businesses they support while retaining the flexibility our changing workforce needs and requires. This week, I reintroduced my bill, the Gig Worker Equity Compensation Act, to expand the category of workers that can benefit from equity compensation to include non-traditional workers. If you want to see the juxtaposition of Democrats and Republican priorities right now, just yesterday, the Biden administration moved to dismantle past efforts to provide gig workers with the flexibility they demand, that they need, that they require. If a state as liberal as California can recognize that a one-size-fits-all mandate on gig workers would be destructive, it should be obvious that the Biden administration should not take those same actions that went down at the ballot box in California. These actions that hurt non-traditional workers, not help them. I initially called for this hearing on GameStop to begin the process of fact-finding to inform our policy discussions. And the bottom line is we're still gathering a number of facts. That's why we have representatives from FINRA and DTCC testifying before us today. I think that's a good thing. Additionally, the SEC's review of the events is ongoing, and as is the committee's work behind the scenes in terms of document review and interviews. Despite the ongoing investigations and the testimony we'll receive today, many Democrats have their so-called solutions. A lot of these things have been kicked around for a long time. At our first GameStop hearing, I asked Democrats to side with the everyday American investors. I'll make that same ask today. We should not punish everyday American investors with a Democrat agenda, progressive agenda that results in fewer investment options or forces folks to start paying to make trades again. So let's go off of what we've learned. Let's stand up for everyday investors and make it easier for them to invest. And let's tear down barriers keeping folks out of the market instead of throwing up new ones to impair their ability to be in the market. Let's stand up for equity, true equity, and that's ownership. Ownership of the American economy, ownership in our capital markets, so we can remain the center of the free world's economic policies. And so with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. McHenry. I'm pleased that you see something good about our hearing today. I now recognize the chair of the Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship, and Capital Markets, the gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, for 1 minute.
I thank Chairman Yesler for being here, and I hope he joins us often. The ranking member is concerned about whether gig workers in my state have the protection that we accord employees. It's a little far from the mandate of our committee. But within our committee's jurisdiction is to make sure that when investors trade stocks, they get the best possible deal and are not told that there's zero transactions cost when the big transactions cost is the spread, and you are paying for the transaction unless you're getting the best possible price improvement. Price improvement may not be fully available if your broker is getting paid for order flow or if your broker is acting as the market maker. We also need to look at short sale disclosures. Right now, there are disclosures filed with the SEC quarterly. That is so 1977. You would expect reports to be filed far more often. And we have to discuss what reports should be made public. And I look forward also to looking at margin selling.
Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Huizenga, for 1 minute.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Advancements in technology have improved access to our capital markets and created new opportunities for countless Americans to participate in our markets who were previously excluded. App-based interfaces combined with zero commission trades, fractional share trading, and lowered account minimums have ushered in a new generation of investors. However, instead of celebrating this new era of investment, how have my colleagues across the aisle responded for the most part? By falsely claiming that this increase in market participation has caused gamification of the trading experience, markets are rigged, and some have even gone so far as to say and equating it to gambling in a casino. Well, as Rahm Emanuel famously said, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. I mean, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before, close quote. Well, that's exactly what my friends on the other side of the aisle are doing. They're exploiting a high-profile situation to push a radical progressive agenda where these proposed small d Democratic solutions that will only further prevent everyday American investors from accessing our capital markets and denying them the opportunity to further save and invest for a more prosperous future. I yield back.
Thank you. I want now to welcome today's distinguished witnesses to the committee. First, we have the Honorable Gary Gensler, who is the recently confirmed chair of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. This is Chair Gensler's first time appearing before the committee in his current capacity. He has previously served as chair of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission and in several senior roles at the Department of the Treasury. Next, we have Mr. Michael Botson, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. And finally, we have Mr. Robert Cook, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. Without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. Each of you will have 5 minutes to summarize your testimony. You should be able to see a timer on your screen that will indicate how much time you have left, and a chime will go off at the end of your time. I would ask you to be mindful of the timer and quickly wrap up your testimony if you hear the chime. Chair Gensler, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your oral testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the committee. I'm honored to appear before you today for the first time as chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. I've been in front of this committee multiple times in multiple administrations, and I will say this, I look forward to the day where we can meet in person in your beautiful hearing room again. Thank you for inviting me to testify on January's market volatility, and I'm pleased to be here with Mike Botson and Robert Cook, who I've known for a number of years as well. I'd like to note that my views are my own, and I'm not speaking on behalf of my fellow commissioners or of the SEC staff. These events are part of a larger story about the intersection of finance and technology, which have lived in a symbiotic relationship since antiquity. And one thing that I've come to believe is that technology can bring greater access to our capital markets. Our central question is this, though. When new technologies come along and change the face of finance, as they have done for decades, how do we continue to achieve our core public policy goals? In my role, I will always be animated by thinking about working families in the SEC's three-part mission: protecting investors, promoting fair, orderly, and efficient markets, facilitating capital formation. I'm pleased to submit written testimony that goes into detail on several factors at play during January's events. I'll just highlight a few of those key issues in this opening statement. First is gamification and user experience. I agree with the members who have already said these new user experiences have facilitated a lot for investors. They've expanded access to capital, making it easier for investors to sign up, start trading, learn about investing. These apps also use a host of features that have come to be familiar in our increasingly online world, such as gamification, behavioral prompts, and predictive data analytics. Many of these features, in essence, encourage investors to trade more frequently. This could have a substantial effect on a saver's financial position. Some academic studies suggest that the more actively you trade, the lower your returns. So while they're encouraging investing, they may also be encouraging active trading. I've asked the staff to prepare a request for public comment on these issues. The SEC must remain attuned to rapidly changing technologies with an eye to freshening up our rule set where appropriate to continue to achieve our mission. If we don't address this now, the investing public, those saving for future retirement and education, may shoulder the burden later. The second topic I'd like to discuss is this area around payment for order flow. This practice brings to mind a number of questions, including whether it creates inherent conflicts of interest between the broker-dealers on the one side and their customers on the other who want to achieve, under our rules, best execution. Now, it's important to consider this, I think, in the overall context of market structure. Currently, a significant amount of retail orders are routed to a small number of wholesalers. I detail this more in the written testimony, but I think it raises questions about whether the market structure best promotes fair, orderly, and efficient markets. Evolving market technologies, along with this payment for order flow, has also led to increasing market concentration, which we've found, history and economics show, concentration can lead to fragility in markets, deter healthy competition, and limit innovation. The next issue is short selling and market transparency. And again, as outlined in the testimony, under Dodd-Frank reforms, the SEC received mandates and authorities to increase transparency in the market. So I've asked SEC staff to prepare recommendations on transparency in short selling, stock loan markets, and something called total return swaps, which was at the center of this Archegos events in March, for commission consideration. And the 5 of us commissioners can take a look to see what to do next. Next, today's social media tools have far greater reach, scale, and anonymity than previous technology. This raises the possibility that wrongdoers will attempt to use their powerful forums to hype certain stocks or manipulate markets. I'm not concerned about regular investors exercising their free speech rights online. I'm more concerned whether bad actors potentially take advantage of influential platforms. Further, is the decisions by some broker-dealers to redirect customer trading raised several issues around clearance and settlement. In essence, they stopped investors from investing. And this raises questions of the market, what I'll call plumbing. Sorry to Mike Bobson if I call the infrastructure plumbing. But investors were shut out. I do believe we can lower costs and risk in our market by shortening the settlement cycle. For instance, I've asked SEC staff to put together a draft proposal for the commission on the possibility of shortening the settlement cycles. I thank you. I look forward to your questions. It's good to be back with you. And again, I look forward to doing this in person.
Thank you, Chair Gensler. Next, we will go to Mr. Botson. You are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your oral testimony.
Chairwoman Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and members of the committee. My name is Michael Botson, and I am the CEO of Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, a holding company that operates 3 SEC-regulated clearing agencies, including National Securities Clearing Corporation, or NSCC, of which I will speak to today. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the committee. In my line of work, the best days are those when nothing too exciting happens. That's because DTCC is, at its heart, a risk management organization, enhancing efficiencies and reliability in the markets. On a normal day, we process about 200 million buys and sales for a value of nearly $2 trillion. Through netting, that is reduced to about 1 million securities movements and 35 billion in cash movement, creating significant efficiencies in the market. When you buy or sell a stock, it takes 2 days for the trade to be completed. This is called T+2 settlement, trade date plus 2 days. A lot could happen during those 2 days that could create a risk that the buyer or seller fails to deliver money or shares. Because of clearing, investors don't have to worry about that. Clearing protects both firms and their customers against default risk. Default risk can destabilize markets, particularly in volatile times. People are reluctant to trade if they aren't sure they will get what they agreed to. And imagine how inefficient it would be for every market participant to assess the creditworthiness of everyone else in the market. That's where DTCC comes in. We are infrastructure. You can call us plumbing. We're not insulted. We operate behind the scenes to guarantee completion of virtually all equity trades. We do not trade or take positions or bet on the direction of the market. We do not give investment advice. We do not know who the customers are behind the trades or their reasons for trading. We simply process and risk manage trades. DTCC protects against default risk by collecting margin, which is money that clearing members post as collateral. If a clearing member defaults between trade date and settlement date, DTCC uses that collateral to complete the defaulting member's trades, no matter how much prices may have changed. Margin requirements are calculated using statistical models and model-based calculations that are set forth in our rules, which must be approved by the SEC. Margin requirements increase as the risk in the member's portfolio increases. In other words, the greater the potential loss a default could produce, the greater the need for collateral. Volatility has a very large impact on margin requirements. We saw this play out during the week of January 25th. Both volumes and volatility that week were extraordinary. On January 27th, NSCC processed about 474 million transaction size, exceeding the pandemic-related record volume from March 2020 by more than 100 million trades. The concentration of trading in a small number of meme stocks that week was also extraordinary. Applying those statistical models and formulas, margin requirements increased substantially for firms with large volumes in these stocks. I appreciate that the committee is exploring ways to continue to improve our markets. I'd like to describe one effort that DTCC has undertaken to date, shortening the settlement cycle for equities from 2 days to 1 day. That may sound like a small thing, it's just 1 day, but cutting the settlement period in half can make a difference. We believe that shortening the settlement cycle to T+1 would enhance market resilience, reduce margin requirements, and lower costs for investors. Following a multi-year industry-wide effort, settlement was shortened in 2017 from T3 to T2, achieving margin savings estimated at 25%. DTCC estimates that the volatility component of margin requirements could potentially be reduced by 40% with a move to T1. This could save our clearing members upwards of $6 billion per day during periods of extreme volatility. While DTCC's technology can support T+1 today, changing the industry convention is a major undertaking that will require coordinated efforts across the whole industry. Over the past year, DTCC has engaged with a cross-section of the industry to assess readiness to further shorten the settlement cycle. In February, DTCC published a white paper outlining the benefits associated with multiple changes to the settlement cycle, including a move to T1. We are working with SIFMA and ICI to accelerate this effort. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boutzen. Now we will go to Mr. Cook. You are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your oral testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Waters. Thank you, Ranking Member McHenry and members of the committee for this opportunity to testify today, together with Chair Gensler and Mr. Boutzen, regarding the January market events related to trading in GameStop and certain other stocks. We commend the committee's review of these events and related investor protection concerns. FINRA's mission is to protect investors and promote market integrity. We are a not-for-profit SRO, and we support the SEC in overseeing one critical part of the securities industry, certain broker-dealers and the individuals they employ. To that end, we administer comprehensive regulatory programs, including surveillance, risk monitoring, examination, and enforcement. And we, in turn, are subject to comprehensive examination and oversight by the SEC. This committee has heard already about the events in January, including the significant price swings and trading volume in GameStop and a limited number of other stocks. In this context, some broker-dealers restricted trading in these securities on a short-term basis. This led to confusion and frustration among some investors and concerns about the fairness of the markets. The events also focused attention on the growth of popular new retail trading platforms and services, changes in investor behavior, and the influence of social media on the markets. Our markets are dynamic and continually evolving. Market participants constantly innovate new technologies, methods of communication, and investment products and services. These innovations often benefit investors, such as by providing easier access to the markets, lower costs, and a wider range of investment products and services to choose from. But they can also present new and sometimes unanticipated risks. So regulators must constantly review whether the rules governing the road need to be updated in light of new developments to better protect investors while still facilitating vibrant and innovative markets and the opportunities these create. At FINRA, we are committed to doing just that. One important resource we rely on in this process is the research of the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, including recent research on new, inexperienced investors and how they approach investing. Since the events of January, FINRA has established an internal working group that's devoting significant resources to investigating whether its broker-dealer members complied with SEC and FINRA rules. We have also issued regulatory notices reminding firms of relevant duties and responsibilities in this area. Although I cannot comment on specific firms or ongoing investigations or enforcement matters, generally speaking, we are reviewing order routing practices, the circumstances under which trading restrictions were imposed, any potential manipulative conduct, and compliance with short sale requirements, among other matters. I can assure the committee that we will take all appropriate disciplinary or other remedial action as warranted if the facts indicate a violation of SEC or FINRA rules. The upcoming SEC report on these market events will be critical in analyzing whether existing rules and standards should be updated. Many of the policy questions raised in your hearings to date involve areas in which the SEC has primary policymaking responsibility, such as market structure, payment for order flow, short sale regulation and disclosure, the settlement cycle, enhanced broker-dealer financial responsibility requirements, and whether certain communications with retail investors constitute recommendations that should be covered by the SEC's regulation best interest. We will support the SEC in its review of these areas and then align FINRA's rules and oversight activities where necessary or appropriate. My written testimony offers some further perspectives on key topics under the SEC's jurisdiction and also describes some areas where we are considering whether updates or guidance regarding our own rules would be appropriate. For example, we intend to review short sale position reporting by broker-dealers, as well as continue our review of the effects of gamification on retail investors. FINRA looks forward to working with this committee, the SEC, and our fellow regulators to review and learn from these recent market events so that we can strengthen investor protections and enhance confidence in our nation's capital markets. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. And this question is for Chair Gensler. This committee has examined numerous issues that have arisen out of the GameStop short squeeze that took place earlier this year, including systemic risk arising from firms such as Citadel, who are executing close to 50% of all U.S. listed retail volume. During the first hearing, I questioned whether Citadel poses a systemic risk to our financial markets. I'm also concerned about what Citadel's outsized market impact means for pricing and best execution, another market structure issue that this committee has examined as part of these hearings. As a newly confirmed chair of the SEC, what will your approach be with respect to mitigating the risk associated with outsized market impact and understanding threats to our financial stability?
I thank you for that question. I thank you for that question. I think that at the heart of well-functioning markets and the mission of the SEC, fair, orderly, and efficient markets, is promoting competition in markets. It can be done through transparency, but it's also by looking at our rule set to make sure that our rule set inspires more competition rather than concentration. And we have seen, as you noted in your hearing, an increasing concentration in market making and also separately in brokerage, and particularly around retail order flow. And so I've asked the staff, both from the Division of Economic Research and Analysis and Trading and Markets, to sort of give us a view, give internally the commission a view. What should we be thinking about in our market structure to address this? We've seen such concentration come in other markets. We know it's in search. When we all go online and search, there's really one dominant search engine. We know it's true in retail, buying retail products online. There's some dominance to that. And so our modern 2020s economy does tend towards certain, what's called in economics, network effects. So I've asked the staff just to think through that and to help provide us with guidance as commissioners. How do we promote competition in the face of these network economic effects that are leading to concentration?
Well, I want to thank you for that response. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that there is real concern about concentration. And while you have instructed staff to do some additional research to determine the extent of it, it is something that we should be concerned about. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, I think that capital formation for issuers and for investors on the other side benefit from some broad competition amongst market actors. And as we get more concentration in the middle of the market, whether it's market making or brokerage, we could lose that. Concentration could lead to more fragile markets, meaning less orderly, and also more costly or less efficient markets. And that's what history and economics tell us when we get concentration.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the concern that you are identifying as you talk about this concentration and what could happen if, in fact, we're not aware and make some efforts to deal with it. With that, I'm going to basically call on Mr. McHenry for his questions.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And Chairman Gensler, thank you for being here, and welcome back before the committee, and congratulations on your new role. I know that Acting Chair Lee, at the time of the GameStop, this GameStop trade, emphasized that the core market infrastructure is quite resilient. Does the commission intend to release any additional findings?
Thank you. Thank you for our meeting earlier this week. I look forward to doing those on some regular basis with the chair and you and the subcommittee and other members. We are looking at putting together a report. I'm only in my 3rd week in the job, but our economists, our trading and markets folks have come together, and I think we'll be releasing a report sometime this summer that will more detail the range of activities out of the January events.
Well, thank you for that. Small businesses right now are emerging from the pandemic just like everyone is. And, these small businesses need access to capital. And as you know, I've been focused on some of the burdensome requirements of the original regulation crowdfunding, which I helped legislate, and President Obama signed into law. There have been some helpful changes made to Reg CF to make it more efficient, and to boost trading in Reg A and Reg CF securities, such as preemption under certain state regulations. Do you support these streamlining efforts for small businesses, and are you looking at additional steps?
I look forward to working with you and your staff to learn more about your initiatives and suggestions, but at the core, and maybe it's just a bit because my dad had a small business, never more than 30 employees, and didn't access the broad capital markets, but I think that small business entrepreneur efforts are really kind of, if I might say, a bit of the backbone of American entrepreneurism and our economies. And so access to the capital markets is a critical piece, whether it's accessing loans that might be securitized in the markets or accessing through equities. But I look forward to hearing more from you and your staff on ideas.
Okay, but no comment on Reg CF?
I again, just 3 weeks into the job, but I haven't looked closely at Reg CF yet, or frankly gotten a detailed enough briefing to see how we can, as you say, and I really do believe this, facilitate capital formation up and down the issuer spectrum.
Well, let's pivot to something that you spent some time out of government understanding. I think what we've all tried to seek is greater collaboration across agencies on the regulatory framework for digital assets, cryptocurrencies, notably. This includes more engagement from industry and appropriate regulators. In 2019, the Commission staff produced the framework for investment contract analysis of digital assets. Since then, the staff has sought feedback on a number of issues, most recently on the evolving standards and the best practices for custody. This is progress, but I believe more concrete steps are necessary to further the crypto market. As you look at this issue, what steps can you outline to bring regulatory clarity so that we can have a vibrant digital asset marketplace with legitimate money and the rule of law?
Well, I thank you for asking that. And I think that this market, which is close to $2 trillion crypto asset market, is one that could benefit from greater investor protection. Within the SEC's current authorities, our authorities around securities and around products, asset managers, and products that might invest in these cryptocurrencies. So I think that, as you mentioned, we put out a comment, I think it was in October or November, asking for feedback on custody. I would hope that we would move forward and provide greater clarity around custody. I do think that working with Congress, and I think it's only Congress that could really address it, it'd be good to consider, if you would ask my thoughts, to consider whether to bring greater investor protection to the crypto exchanges. And I think if that were to be the case, because right now the exchanges trading in these crypto assets do not have a regulatory framework, either at the SEC or our sister agency, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, that could instill greater confidence. Right now, there's not a market regulator around these crypto exchanges, and thus there's really not protection against fraud or manipulation or a conflict.
Well, I've time for one final question, Chairman Gensler. I'm encouraged by your comments on crypto. Last year, the commission proposed to allow certain gig workers to have access to equity compensation under the SEC's rules. Will you commit to finishing this important rulemaking?
Again, in my third week, I need to get a briefing on it. I commit to work with the staff, understand what the comments were, because I don't know what comments came in, and trying to understand the economics around that rule set.
Well, thank you. And I wish you great luck in your tenure, and thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your outreach.
Thank you.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes. We will go on to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez. The gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, who is the chair of the subcommittee on investor protection, entrepreneurship, and capital markets, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Responding to the ranking member, who wants to instill confidence in those buying and selling cryptocurrencies. The only confidence I have is that the US dollar is an outstandingly good currency, but cryptocurrencies, if they succeed, will have unique appeal to only two groups: narco-terrorists and tax evaders. And for us to channel the animal spirits that should be investing in the American economy into creating tools for those who want to evade U.S. taxes is a step toward a much weaker America. Mr. Gensler, you talked about Archegos and the total return swap. The image I have of 1929 is investors jumping out of buildings on Wall Street because they bought stock at 7, 8, 9 times margin. And in the 1930s, we decided to protect the markets and say that if you want to buy stock, the most margin you could get was 1-time margin, sometimes a little more. But we then see that using a total return swap, the big guys like Archegos can get 7 times margin, can invest only 1/7 the cash to control $100 million worth of this block of shares or that block of shares. So this raises the question, is 7-to-1 margin fine for everybody, and is that good for the markets? Should 1-time margin be the rule for everybody, and we should plug the loopholes? Or should we continue to have a system where if you're a family office, you can have 7 times margin by calling it a total return swap? And if you're the regular Robinhood investor, you can only get 1 time margin. What do we do with, what should the margin rule be?
So I think you raised some very important questions that came out of the market events late in March, not the January ones, but the March events around a family office, Archegos. And they're currently, our family offices are outside of much of the SEC's remit, not all of it.
If I can clarify, this is not a question about family offices.
Okay.
Just have one investment company that has $1 billion and decides they want 7-to-1 margin. The fact this was a family office, put that aside. Whether you disclose it or you don't, whether you're a family office or a hedge fund or a billionaire, should you be able to get 7-to-1 margin? And if so, how come the Robinhood guy can't?
So I think that I've asked staff to better understand, and again, it's just the third week, the rules that were adopted by the SEC that are yet to go into final implementation around the margin for these securities-based swaps and how they would have affected the circumstance.
I look
But
forward.
you're right, sir, that they are different than the retail investor. And this is true across our markets. And I've asked staff to better inform me as to
at least one
what we
other
should do
question
there.
for Mr. Cook. When it comes to disclosing short selling, there's arguments on both sides as to whether to disclose what an individual investor is doing. Some say it's harmful, some say it's helpful, but there seems to be agreement that the aggregate information is helpful. We ought to know in aggregate how many people are, how many shares of GameStop are short. You generate that information, but you don't put it on your website. I'm told that you provide it to the exchanges and they publish it if they want to, and often behind a paywall. Why doesn't FINRA disclose all this information to everybody for free as quickly as you can?
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. That's a great question. I think we are, as we look at disclosure around short selling, I think there are some good arguments that we can do more here. I've asked our staff to prepare a regulatory notice to solicit comment on changes to FINRA's disclosure here to make it more frequent and more granular. And certainly as part of that, we can look at the way in which that disclosure is disseminated.
Is there any justification for what is a regulatory agency generating this information and giving it to private companies for them to sell rather than disclose it to the public?
I'm inclined to I appreciate the gist of your question, sir, and I'm inclined to be biased towards making it publicly available. I don't understand all the history behind how this developed. I think that's something we need to look into, but I commit to that we can certainly do that.
Yeah, my time has expired, but I look forward to looking at not only payment for order flow, but how we get the best price improvement for every investor, whether it be an internalized transaction or one that goes to a market maker. I'll just say, if Citadel can't pay Robinhood, would it be different if Citadel bought Robinhood? But that's just for the record. I give back.
Thank you very much. The gentlewoman from Missouri, Mrs. Wagner, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chairman Gensler, welcome as a new SEC chair. And I'm going to take this opportunity to veer off course a bit and mention that after years of thorough and proactive input and feedback from stakeholders, including Main Street investors, the SEC's finalized its Regulation Best, or Reg BI, is now in effect. This rule raises the standard of care for broker dealers while preserving access and choices for Main Street investors. Chairman Gensler, under your leadership, does the SEC plan to make any amendments to Reg BI?
Thank you. Good to see you here today. As I said in my confirmation hearing, similar question came up. I think that it's important that investors actually have brokers take their best interest at heart. And that's what we're going to do through examination and enforcement, guidance, ensure that that rule is fully complied with as written.
Great. Applied as written. Glad to hear it. Thank you. Chairman Gensler, as you begin your work here at the SEC, I want to really urge you to ensure that the commission and its staff under your leadership follow its very core mission, which is, one, to protect investors, which I care deeply about here in Missouri's 2nd District, to maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and to facilitate capital formation. I want to thank you for appearing before us today, and I hope that we can work together to provide investment choice and access and affordability, I would say, to America's Main Street investors. Thank you. Mr. Bodson, is it possible that a financial transaction tax could increase financial market volatility?
Thank you, Congresswoman. FTTs are not an area of my expertise. Obviously, there have been a lot of studies done in a lot of different markets with very, very mixed results, mostly focused on whether or not they're an effective tool for raising taxes. In some markets like Hong Kong, they've been effective, but they have a very different income tax and capital gains structure, no capital gains tax. In other markets, they've shown to limit trading or subdue, so they don't have the effect that is expected. I've not seen anything discussing FTTs and volatility per se. I would not, my uneducated view would be they would be somewhat separated, but again, I have not seen any studies to indicate either way.
Aren't there more effective ways to improve our financial market operations than the bills being proposed today? Could you describe any of those, Mr. Bodson?
Well, I think the step, thank you, Congresswoman, the step from T2 to T1 will create a lot of efficiencies in the marketplace, both on the operational side as well as lowering the margin requirements that we impose because of the 2-day settlement versus 1-day settlement. So I think those would be steps in the right direction in terms of lowering costs, not just for our direct members, but for the end beneficiaries, be it the mutual fund, pension funds, or the small retail investor. We look to decrease costs whichever way we can.
Mr. Bodson, in your view, how would shortening the settlement cycle help prevent future trading restrictions similar to the ones imposed by Robinhood and other brokerages earlier this year?
I'm not aware of the reasons for other firms, so I'm not going to speculate about that. Robinhood did say that their decision was based on their ability to meet our margin charges. If we do lessen the time to settlement from T2 to T1, time is risk. I think it's been well explained that by lowering the period, the amount of open transactions that we have to charge margin against would get